So we wanted to invite you together because we are kind of having the fun of collaborating on our lessons for the next several weeks as we go towards Easter. And we like to, Jean Marie and I like to kind of banter back and forth on any subject that comes to us. So one of the things that we know, having worked together as we have, is that we have different opinions. And sometimes we agree and sometimes we don't agree. When we don't agree, we do that well. We're very willing to honor the differences. And one of the advantages of this kind of an environment is that you have the opportunity to get different perspectives. And so we just wanted to take the lessons for the next few weeks deeper and really give all of us a chance to take it a level more, because when you're talking about healing and you're talking about foundational spiritual principles, we have a tendency to build on top of something we think we understand until someone asks us a question, and then we go kind of back to the foundation and think, oh, did I really get that? Do I really understand that? So we wanted to provide an open forum for questions on what we talked about last week. And I think if you watched our lessons, our reflections are probably a little bit different and have some of the same components, obviously, because we didn't script them out or anything. We just talked together. Mm-hmm. But we would really love to be here in service to the community and answer any questions that you have, either on the, oh, you are a good husband. Thank you. I got coffee. Any questions that you have on last week, or any questions you have in general. And I don't know how you guys are positioned. I have you all on gallery view, just because it really wasn't our intention to be stars of the show. It was our intention to bring the communities together and be able to see each other. So I just want to invite you to look at each other's faces and know that we are one unity community from two places gathering together. And I wonder, Jean Marie, if you would be willing to do a little opening for us, a little opening prayer to bring us together.
Sure. You know what? I know this doesn't always work well through Zoom, but I love sometimes just to use the singing bowl to help. It's just a nice way to center ourselves. So why don't we just take a deep breath and allow the gong to simply allow us to go wherever we need to go. Tonight is a space of openness and of deep contemplation. And we recognize the wisdom that is already within us. And it really doesn't matter where we come from, what background we have, religious background or human background, spiritual background. It doesn't matter what we call the divine, or even if we call anything divine. We're simply here to be in joyful collaboration, two communities, a chance to see, experience, and be. So we allow the ringing of the gong just to remind us that according to unity beliefs, we all share this one presence and one power expressed through the idea of Christ. And we are grateful for having this opportunity tonight and for a few weeks to come together and be together and see the Christ in each other. And so it is. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Thank you. And now I hear the sound of the clunk that is the chime that my folks have been telling me. What happened to our chime?
It doesn't work, right?
I know, but it was working for us, and I don't know what I've changed on my. Here's what I would love if you would do this, because you would help me would you go up on your screen in the top left-hand corner and turn on original sound? It should say, there's right up in the left-hand corner. Do you see that?
Yeah, do it again.
Okay, now hit your chime and let's see. Aha.
Is that
okay? That is the trick. The mystery is solved. I will have that fixed on Sunday morning, folks. Yay.
All right.
Already look what we've done.
Now I wonder what's going to be messed up because I turned it on. So do I have to turn it back off, or?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't think so. I think it'll be fine.
Because they've been complaining about the affirmation ritual, that the gong wouldn't work. Yeah. So.
That's what, and so ours was working for a really long time until last weekend, and then we had the same funk sound. Now we know. Awesome. So look at, something wonderful has happened already. So we just are so excited about having this time with you and seeing your lovely faces and seeing what's on your mind. And so I want to invite you to use to go open. I think we have to open chat, don't we? To be able to, where is it, Jean-Marie? Where's the hand raising thing?
When you click on reactions, there's one option, or you click on participants, I think you have more options there.
Yep.
I think for most, I have reactions, and then I can raise hands and I can give little emojis.
So reactions is on the bottom bar. If you put your cursor down on the bottom bar, you'll see a little place that says reactions toward the right. And if you open that, right at the bottom says raise your hand. If you guys will raise your hand if you have a question, it will help us to not talk over the top of each other. And that way we'll hear the questions fully and be able to answer them. So River, I see that you've got your hand up. Why don't we start with you?
I was just seeing if it would work. I didn't see it go up. I'm sorry. I would love to start with me if there was something I could say to start. So, but maybe I'll come back later.
Okay. Would someone else like to ask a question? Well, this could be a really long day. If you guys, obviously we did a good job. All right, Adrian, thank you for saving us. What's your question?
Okay, I'm going to show my complete and total ignorance here. Whenever Jean-Marie started talking about the 4 subtle bodies, I started wondering why I'd never heard of this before in those terms. And I wondered, is this a tradition? Is this out of the Christian tradition? Is this out of an Eastern tradition? Why is this not a familiar term with me? Am I just behind the curve here and don't know about it yet?
Yeah, so I'll start with that, Jean-Marie, if that's okay with you. Yeah, in Eastern traditions, particularly in the Hindu faith, there's a reference to 5 or 6 subtle bodies, depending upon what you follow. The idea of subtle bodies in earth-based traditions, and I'm doing 2 things here, so I'm going to let people in the room as well.
I'll do the letting them in.
Okay, thank you. So the idea of subtle bodies in earth-based traditions isn't a documented, where in the Eastern faiths there's documentation. Those earth-based traditions, which tend to be the more indigenous tribal cultural traditions, those are generally undocumented teachings that are passed down from one person to another, from one tribal leader to another. And so, but they're not new teachings. Mm-hmm. They are teachings that you find kind of across a universal plane, which is one of the places that I think when it comes to Charles and Myrtle, what I think was so brilliant about them is that they spent so much time in meditation, and they captured in that kind of still-centered space of connecting to their inner indwelling divine, they captured a lot of these concepts but they captured them in different ways. They're not it wasn't that most of what they taught came from an experience they had here. But if you've done cross-cultural study, cross-cultural religious study, you start to see that these ideas that we call new thought, they're not new at all. They've been around for a really long time, and they cross a lot of cultural planes. Do you want to add to that, Shanri?
Yeah, I guess, the Eastern philosophies really tend to be a little bit more particular when it comes to the subtle bodies, like Ahriana said, the 5 or 6, sometimes even 7. And in the Western, we have it a little bit easier, which is actually good. It's easier to think in terms of 4 subtle bodies. We're all very familiar with body, the mind, the heart, and the spirit, right? Or the heart and soul. Although in Unity we see that as something different. And the inspiration really is to start thinking in subtle bodies, is that when we approach spirituality from a practical point of view, not as an intellectual study, but as a practice, then we need to learn to incorporate all subtle bodies, or I like to use the term all levels of being, which basically means the same thing. And then later on, we can, once we get the clarity on these different bodies, that the things that are happening within us and outside of us are affecting us on all these levels. We also get a great sense of compassion for ourselves and others, because we start to understand that we are not necessarily just affected exclusively on one level of being or one subtle body, but we're actually affected on all bodies simultaneously. We may not be aware of that, but as we learn to move into that kind of awareness, we actually give ourselves a great opportunity of healing, and to see, wow, I am feeling physically okay today. My body is responding really well, but there's something in my heart that aches. And so that's where I think the study of the subtle bodies has really huge value. I wouldn't worry too much about whether it's 4, 5, 6, or 7. Just getting the concept of there's multiple bodies that we deal with on a moment-to-moment level is important. That's a good starting point.
And in case any of you, I know as I look at our folks from Unity in the Rockies, a couple of you I don't think were at last Sunday's service. So last Sunday we started talking about healing the mind, about how we've been affected over the last year of being kind of COVID confined. And we really, when we started talking about this, we started talking about what needs healing from a year of isolation. How has our mind been affected? How do we think differently? What are the losses, the mental losses that we've experienced, and what are the mental gains that we've experienced? And when we talk about 4 subtle bodies, we're talking about the mind, the heart, the body, and the spirit, or your spiritual nature. So you could say, what are 4 natures? What are 4 ways that you're impacted by things? You're impacted, your mind is impacted, your emotional field or your heart is impacted, your physical body is impacted, and your way of moving through your spiritual connection or connectedness is impacted. And that's really kind of what we're looking at. And we're also looking through the lens of, do we really believe as a community, as the Unity movement, do we really believe our own story about the Fillmores and how we came to be? Do we believe the healing that is said to have occurred? And more importantly than whether we believe it could have happened for them, do we believe that if they did it, we should be able to do it as well. So are we talking about healing, or are we actually engaging in the practices? And we felt like the exploration of the subtle bodies and kind of breaking this down into different parts of yourself that may have been affected would make it a little bit more like eating an elephant one bite at a time instead of all at once. Is there another question?
Or does that answer your question, Adriana?
That's good too, yeah.
Yes, it does. Thank you very much.
We must have done a great job last week. They came here and they have no questions.
Well, River has her end up.
Oh, yes, do you?
Yeah, I actually rose it like this.
Yay. I think, Mark, you had yours up too. We'll get back to you. Okay, your turn.
I've actually been thinking about this a lot because so much of our becoming is our experiences in our interactions with each other on a day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month basis, right? The people we spend time with, the people we hug, the people that we are in groups with, all of that is part of our perpetual, always happening becoming. And so I've been thinking a lot about this past year, and I've had very little human to human contact, and I live alone. And what I've noticed, one of the things that I've noticed is because I'm not as active in my external world, that I've been going deeper in my internal world and doing a lot of self-nurturing and self-loving, self-communication, self-interacting, all of that's deepening my spiritual practice, doing a lot more journaling, all of that. So my intra relationship with myself has grown because of my lack of inter relationships with the outside world.
And that's really an important point too, is again the difference. There's different ways how Western and Eastern spiritual practices approach the same goal. And usually in the Western world, and this is not 100%, this is just in generally speaking, when we think of exploring the spiritual, or when we move toward salvation or enlightenment or awakening or whatever you want to call it, a greater way of being, the idea is that we usually move outward and upward. In Eastern practices, it's inward and downward. So one of the challenges that we've had is when you have grown up in the Western world and you are focused on out and up, which when you look at the religions, the Western religions, when you look at how we usually approach spirituality, I say usually, Unity has a lot of Eastern influences, so we are already going inward and down. But when you look at your friends who may not be within Unity or some similar practices, you will see that there is a lot of outward and upward focus, finding God outside of ourselves and somewhere up there. Whereas in Unity, we tend to come more like going within, find the divine within, and going deep. And so that's where I think we can really we help ourselves in our relationships, starting to learn what some people may go through. How difficult must it be for someone who goes out and up all the time, looking for God out and upward, and boom, COVID hits, and what are we forced to do? This will be cut off. We put literally a mask on. We can no longer go out this way as we usually do. We are focused to go within. That can be a huge struggle. I don't know about your community, but even a community here in Fort Worth that is used to those inward practices, many are struggling with that isolation. And again, that's why I think looking at what's happening with us on all levels of being is a great benefit.
Wendy?
Okay. And I haven't figured out how to articulate this, so I'm not sure how it'll come out. But in our Sunday message in Colorado Springs, and across the world, I guess, because it went forth. Part of it was the question that Ahriana posed. Do you believe you have within you the complete power to heal yourself? So, phrase something like that. Evidently, most people raised their hand. I did not. And even the question concerns me, actually. I thought about something I did recently that I think was very healthy, and it was also somewhat difficult. And that is, I had a, what do you call it? I had a consultation with a counselor. For me to make that appointment in hopes of understanding, not because I had a crisis in this particular case, but to understand myself better, for someone like me who's very independent, to realize that somebody else could help me help myself was, I think, a very healthy thing for me. And I think of people who may, and this might be me too, beat themselves up because they can't heal themselves. They feel, they're not getting better psychologically or physically, spiritually. And by the kind of message we got, I think it could be construed, even though that might have not been the intention, of to discourage people from reaching out to resources that could really empower them. So I just, if you could speak to that, I would appreciate it.
I'll start, Jean-Marie, if that's okay with you. I absolutely am on board with you, first of all, Wendy. It's always one of the really hard things for me about this theological question. If we talk about this and we really explore it, do we stop people from seeking medical care when they have a need for medical care? Is it possible to have this conversation without giving a message that could be detrimental to somebody? So it's always a consideration for me. It's why I asked in a question, do you believe that this could happen for you? This is the story that we have about Myrtle Fillmore, that Myrtle was able to heal herself of tuberculosis in a 2-year period using a prayer practice. And I didn't know Myrtle. It was a long time ago. I know that the story has such strength at its core that it changed her husband, and that they as a couple changed their family, and that family as a whole became a movement of people who continued to have, over a several-year experience, such a number of healings that took place that I have to pay attention to it. I have to actually look at it and ask myself, okay, how likely is it that people at that time who knew the Fillmores would have devoted their time and their attention to such the degree that we became the unity movement if there wasn't something happening? And I kind of go back to the same stories about Jesus the same way. Like, these stories have lasted years and years and years and years and years and centuries, and here they are still, we're still sharing them, and we weren't there when they happened. So what do we really believe? And it certainly is possible that I could give more clarity, because I never want to discourage anybody from getting help on any level for any reason. I also think it's incredibly important to really stop and ask ourselves, what do I believe about healing myself on any level, whether it's healing my mind or healing my body or healing my heart or deepening my experience with spirit? Am I coming every Sunday to unity because I want the hope that comes with that? but I'm not really willing to do the practice to see for myself if it's true. So I don't want to discourage anybody from getting any help you need, because my expectation is we're all learning. If we had this mastered, we would have way more people in our seats on Sunday morning. I'm thinking we don't have it mastered. But I want us to actually ask ourselves a real question about it. What is it that we really believe? And wherever you are in your belief, what I respect, Wendy, is your ability to say, I don't know that I really do believe that right now. Because it's not mine. And this is something I tell our community all the time. It's not my job to give you God on a silver platter. It's my job to make you ask questions of yourself. What do you believe? What is true for you? What have you experienced? What do you know? What are you learning? Where are your questions? What would you like to learn? Those are really, that's really where I want to be in relationship with the community. In fact, I think I started last week and said, that old cliche about comforting the afflicted and afflicting those who are too comfortable. Last week, my job was to afflict you if you were too comfortable, by asking you a question that I hope you'll take a little time with. And I hear you, Wendy. I hear you. I hear your concerns. It's always, like I said, I think, from a ministerial point of view across Unity, not unique to Jean-Marie and I, but unique to all Unity ministers, that when you teach from a faith where personal healing is foundational to the kind of the inception of the faith, that we have to figure out ways to be responsible and accountable in that process. Would you like to add to that, Jean-Marie?
Yeah. So first of all, Wendy, thank you so much for sharing that, because I think you're expressing something that many are afraid to say. And the problem that I detect when it comes to these kind of questions, and the tendency for us to then stay in judgment with that kind of question, because we compare ourselves with our own experience to some idealistic idea of how this happens, it can easily turn into what I call a metaphysical malpractice, which simply is the idea that we start using all these wonderful principles and ideas, and we start to use it and start working against us and each other. And we unfortunately have the tendency, many of us have the tendency to do that. We're judging machines. You probably heard that before. And that judging is often very negative, based, on many different reasons. And so it's very natural to think of a question like that. Do you believe you can heal yourself on all levels of being? To then turn into judgment and into something more destructive that the question itself was supposed to inspire. The way I tried to approach it on Sunday was that I talked specifically about the difference between hope and faith, and also the relevance of understanding faith as complete conviction. And so when I ask the question, do you believe you can do this? I really ask it more in a sense on a continuum. It's almost like I'm asking you, if I gave you a continuum from hope, yeah, maybe I can do it, I hope I can, to I'm absolutely convinced I have the ability to do so, where do you stand? So rather than saying, oh, that's never going to happen, or that's, difficult or whatever, just see ourselves on that continuum and say, that's really where my belief right now is. And the other thing I always mention when we talk about the legend, and Myrtle Fillmore healed herself, and I always say legend to make it clear that there's no clear evidence that actually that happened. But let's assume that the legend is true, or there's a lot of truth to it. It still took her 2 years, right? Who in here is absolutely willing to do something so rigorously in addition to the busy lives that we already have for 2 years? Ask yourself that question. And then you come a little bit closer to the answer why sometimes, whether it's healing or any other spiritual practice or topic that we talk about, that it might not come out the way we thought it would be. I think sometimes it's just because we are not as patient as we are asked to be, and maybe not as committed and disciplined. And that should not be taken as a judgment. That should be taken as a realistic point of view and saying, you know, whether you watch The Secret, which I'm not necessarily a big fan of, or read any book or whatever, but if you really dig into it, most of these people, with very few exceptions, it took them quite some time to get miraculous healing accomplished or something very taking a huge step. It took them quite some time to get there. Are we giving ourselves the grace to give us the same amount of time? That's the question that I would ask.
Does that help, Wendy?
Yeah, it does help, but at some point I started thinking about, and I don't know Jean-Marie, but and I just don't know you, Ahriana, as well as I'd like to, but I get the sense that in your preparation in your spiritual lives to become in your roles, you look to spiritual leaders. You didn't try to do it all yourself. You sought for greater wisdom teachers, that a shaman or something that could help you. Not that you would do nothing, not that it would be delivered on a silver platter, but so you might be people I look up to in that level of being, and yet when I look at your lives, I'm guessing that you didn't do it all yourself. You didn't heal yourself, or so.
Yeah, I think what you're alluding to is actually a really a sweet thing to bring forward, and that's that we sometimes want to imbue our teachers with some great ability. So you must have done this because you're teaching it. What is true for most leaders is that we are learning along with you. And a lot of times the questions that come forward when we're teaching are the questions that we're grappling with ourselves, that are real, they're real life questions. The world today is different than it was in 1889 when Myrtle had time to sit in these deep meditative states. Our lives are very different in today's world. And we're inundated with a whole lot of different kinds of information that affect how we think. It's not the same as it was 130 years ago. It's very, very different. And so I think we have to recognize that, and like Jean-Marie said, try and hear things not through a judgmental, not through a self-judgment, right? But in a way that opens us for it to be okay to say, I'm not sure whether I agree with that or not. And that's something that in our community we work really hard on, is that kind of opening to not necessarily agree. Because if you always have to agree with me, if you have to agree with everything that I teach, then we're like a lot of other places that I left because I didn't feel that way. I want to be able to be in conversation where we don't have to agree. That makes it really interesting to me, first of all. Makes me go deeper as a minister. And it lets me know that I'm doing a good job of poking, right? Because you're not sure you agree. Cool. Keep thinking. Keep being in it. See what comes for you. So I appreciate your questions. Laura, I'll get to you. Jeff and Linda, let's start with Jeff. You guys have had your hands up. Laura, would you just hit the hand button, and that way I won't forget you. Jeff, you want to start?
Certainly. I think when you guys took a lot of my thunder, just that last moment, that ultimately, if there are a bazillion people on this planet with a bazillion talents and a bazillion points of interest and education, isn't it foolish to even think that we can do it all ourselves? We're here and we're blessed with those who have been educated and those who have that insight to offer that tidbit every now and again for each of us, that we learn from and we're healed from other people's knowledge and advice and from their insights. And I think that's really foolish to leave go of the modern day technology we have available and say, well, I'm going to do it myself. How egocentric is that?
Jean-Marie, you want to address
Yeah,
that?
I don't think I don't think anyone in Unity, especially Unity, is asking you to let go of anything modern. It's actually quite the opposite. We're not Christian Scientists, and even Christian Scientists are no longer as consistent as they used to be when it comes to, for example, modern technology and medicine and all that. So in Unity, we actually believe to use what's available. So if we are sick and we have, paths to actually get us healthy, then there is a lot of support to actually use what's available to us. But to use that as an excuse not to do our work, that's where I will question everyone. So are we, the beauty about Unity, this is why I'm inspired to be a Unity minister, is ultimately all we're trying to encourage to do is that everyone learns to step into their own power and take on responsibility for themselves. Stop putting away your responsibility and giving it to some God, right, outside of yourself, or giving it up to someone else, but really be responsible for your own life and for your spiritual growth. And so I would always question myself. Everything is true what's been said, right, in terms of, do we really need to know everything? Do we really need to, because we have all these people that know all these things. I agree with all that, but the question is that something you're going to use to limit your own power? Because for a moment you may just doubt that you actually have that power. Or are you really collaborating with that? What is the downside of, for example, going to the doctor, using modern medicine, and add a prayer and meditation practice? What's the downside of that? What's the downside of eating healthy and exercise and do the spiritual practices that resonate with us? And so the mind is so tricky, giving us an enormous power for good and for bad, in a sense, right? We're using the same love, the same kindness, the same goodness that's available to all of us in its infinite form, and we can do many good things or really terrible things with it. And when we just think of ourselves in terms of being all by ourselves and completely honest to ourselves, we can actually quite easily detect when we are not willing to be the divine itself, when we are satisfied with saying, let's find someone else who can do this for me. And so that will be my challenge consistently for myself. Am I willing to do what I'm saying it's possible to do, or am I giving it up to someone else?
Yeah, it's such a great conversation, you guys. Such a good thing to talk about, because I genuinely do believe that it's possible for us to heal ourselves, first of all. I genuinely believe that on every level of my being. I also believe that we are genuinely and completely, inseparably emerging from the divine wholeness. I believe that's who we are. I don't believe when we say we're all the same one in different faces and forms, I really that's what I believe. It's not just something I spout. It's what I believe. I believe that there is immense wisdom in the wholeness we are, Jeff. So when you talk about kind of the arrogance of being only believing me, I actually kind of look at what you offer and what Norma offers and what Eldon offers and what Diana offers, what everybody offers as all different inputs coming from the mind of the same God. So I really see us as, yeah, it's crazy for us not to listen to one another. We're all the same God telling us the same kinds of things from different perspectives. And isn't it a beautiful thing how my eyes looking at you or my voice talking to you is one voice of God, and your voice coming back to me is another voice of God. And even they don't have to agree, right? Because imagine you're this magnificent consciousness and you have thousands of thoughts. We talked this weekend about we in our own little brain here have 50 to 80,000 thoughts a day. How many thoughts are occurring in the mind of God at one time? Oh, it's mind-boggling. It's mind-boggling. And in and amongst those 80,000 thoughts, on a 3-to-1 ratio, we're thinking negative to positive. On a 3-to-1 ratio, we're worried about what's wrong. How would we change in our capacity for healing and for deep interconnection and for that kind of spiritual, and this is the thing, the reason I want us to be able to really look at this is because if we actually can get to that deep place of healing, whether it's healing our heart or healing our mind or healing our body, when we actually have that because we went to our deepest spiritual connection, then we have an experience of God nobody can take away from us. Then each of us has a personal experience of God, whatever you call God. God, Great Spirit, life, love. We have an experience of the divine that you don't even need a minister for anymore because you got it. And that's really my greatest goal for everybody, that we all have this experience of God that leaves us with absolutely zero doubt because it happened for us. So what I hope is the long-term goal, Jeff, in this kind of 6-week period that we're spending together asking these questions, is that we really, really ask ourselves what we believe and what we've experienced, and we really look at it together. That we really look at it because we've invested a huge amount of time in each other. Like we're here, we're committed. Speaking for our community, we're committed to each other. Let's get in and do the down and dirty work. Let's really ask ourselves these things. So that's kind of where I am in it. Linda, you had your hand up next.
I was going to pass, but you know me, I can't do that. The first thing I want to say, Jean-Marie, is that I have never thought of the healing of Myrtle Fillmore as being a legend. It isn't that long ago. There were actually people there who witnessed it that must have written stuff down at the time. So I just want to say that's where my belief stands. But I have never really done any major healing work for myself. And I think the thing that put Myrtle in the frame of mind and the state that she was at the time is simply that they told her she was going to die and that the doctors couldn't do anything. Very rarely in this day and age do we have that specific diagnosis. Sorry, we can't help you, go away. I mean, there are so many amazing medical treatments and therapies and so many different schools of thought about what needs to be done that it always seems like we could go from doctor to doctor to doctor forever. But she couldn't do that. She had two choices. She could die or she could do the spiritual healing. I really feel like if I were in a position where I was really, 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 really ill, that I probably would have more faith and more ability to do that spiritual work than I have right now. It's like if you're up against the wall, where do you turn? And I think you have to turn inward and downward, as well as outward and upward. So,
and this is a practice.
Absolutely.
So that, what I love about what you brought up, Linda, is we probably wouldn't do it unless we had this massive motivation to do this.
Mm-hmm.
But then would we be any good at it at that point? Like, do you really want to wait till you have that motivation? Or do you want to experiment with it and put yourself in it and visit it in, so you're a little more practiced? Jean Marie, you want to respond?
Just a couple of things. So I actually went to the archives in Unity and I talked to the curator of all records up at the seminary and the library and everything, and there's absolutely no record of the miraculous healing of Myrtle Fillmore. And so, and there was no evidence, nothing that could be produced about it. And that was simply it. And for me, for my church or my community, when I say legend, I'm not trying to diminish it, but also actually allow for the possibility that we do not have to necessarily rely on evidence altogether. We can simply just take this inspiration and say, this is possible and we can make it happen. The other thing is, I'm a clinical mental health counselor also. And so I see the dark side of the moon quite often, where when people are extremely sick, terminally sick, they don't have that motivation that you were talking about, Linda. And what are we doing then? And what can we do as a spiritual community to support those who in that moment just do not have the conviction and the power that they will need? I applaud everyone who says, oh, great, I can do this. I'm going to fight this, but I see the other side as well. And can we, as a community, create a level of energy and support that would allow those to then not just go back into their shell and hide away, which is what's happening often, but then start sharing, here is where I'm struggling with this. I don't have that push that I need. I don't have that inspiration. It doesn't matter to me if 10,000 people healed themselves from what I have. I still don't believe I can't have. I think we need to encourage that honesty with each other so that we can tackle it, that we can really address it.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think just a clarification, going to the archives means we don't have a piece of paper that says this is the day that Myrtle got diagnosed. And here's something written from the doctor. And we don't have that thing that says, here's, the doctor's release that says this, Myrtle is clear of tuberculosis. What we have are the stories that were passed down through the generations of the Fillmore family. Some of those were passed down through Myrtle's own healing letters and through the things that were, a lot of Charles Fillmore's writings were actually put together by his second wife. He wasn't so much the prolific writer, but not the prolific publisher. She did a lot of pulling things together. But the information that we have, we have to be careful how we look at it, because we only have the stories that were passed down. And we have to be careful, and kind of along the same lines as what Wendy was saying earlier, that we don't misinform people, that we're clear. This is what we've got. This is why we believe it. And this is also what is the fact of what is available. Diana, I think, Forrest, I think you were next.
Hi. Yeah, I had a thought that I wrote down. I have so much to say on this, but I know that we're probably short on time. So I wrote down my comments so I wouldn't forget what I wanted to say. So as we are all one, who's to say that as I reach to a practitioner for assistance to realize healing, that is as the sacred impulse to reach out and touch the hem of the robe of Christ. This is on the path to continue the practice and wellness as we grow. If a person is suffering and worried about death to the point that they can't even establish that deep sense of I am with you, with the Christ being of their own selves, then who's to say that the impulse to reach out and touch the hem, touch the practitioner's consciousness and ask for help, that is as the same as doing the work ourselves. As we become healed, the experience of being healed as a result of that touch only cements that experience that it can, it will, and it is already. And so I have had such experiences in my studies with the Goldsmith Infinite Way studies that I have. And I'm convinced, but I also realize that so much noise is going on, emotional and life and depression and all the stuff that has come up for every one of us, that even the ability for me to establish that that peace just takes an extreme amount of dedication, just like being interrupted by this phone that you hear ringing in the background.
Jean Marie, I know that because you and I talked about this, I know that you have things to share specific to the story of touching the hem of the rope. So I'm going to just turn it over to you.
Well, like as my folks know, I can easily turn this into a 2-hour dissertation just on touching the hem. But the point I was making on Sunday was I used 3 scripture passages from the New Testament to illustrate how healing actually came about according to the gospel stories. Many people are under the impression that Jesus was a great healer. In fact, he was not. He was a great inspiration. He was great inspirer of healing, or he was the inspiration of great healing. If you look at the stories, who is actually doing the healing? It's most of the time, not all the time, it's the afflicted themselves, according to instruction. And when we look at it metaphysically, it makes even more sense when we see Christ representing the Christ consciousness, and then simply our higher self telling us, wake up, to Jairus' daughter. Or like in the touching of the hem, your faith made you well, right? When you look at all the healing stories and you even analyze who actually is with Jesus and what they represent in the powers, you will find that our faith, our wisdom and love are crucial elements to understand how this healing process works. The healing is always within us and only be inspired by the idea of Christ. Healing is never outside of us. And I've got to be careful by saying never. And of course, we look then at the outside, or we look at modern medicine also as part of our experience and our universe. And so from that perspective, what I sometimes say is, we must know, most of us, if anyone has ever been sick, the flu, or maybe had a scratch that healed on its own, then we must acknowledge that to a certain degree, we must know deep inside that we are already great healers. And the only difference between healing a flu or a cold or a scratch from a rose bush and some of the scarier illnesses is our belief and the limitations that we put on it. But the actions that it takes to go through the healing process, what it takes for us to do the touching of the hem, as the woman demonstrated so beautifully, it's exactly the same. We use the same process, the same creative process for the little things that we don't even doubt. I mean, are you ever doubting that you're going to be okay after getting the flu? Most of us wouldn't doubt that. What if we could expand the courage and the conviction we have about the little things to the bigger question?
And I love what you said, Forrest, about the kind of integrating our doctors and our caregivers and our, like Wendy said, our wise guidance that comes from other people. I think that, integrating those into our vision of pursuing the sacred, I think that's a really powerful perspective. I think we have to, so Jean-Marie talked about coming in and down. And I think there's a time also for coming out and looking across where is God showing up for me in this case of needing healing? I want to bring to myself, to find for myself the right doctor, not just any doctor. I want to find the right source of information when I'm trying to do anything. And so when our prayer practice becomes incorporated in what we're doing to heal ourselves, I think spiritual healing takes a bigger picture, doesn't it? It becomes more expansive when we say, I'm going to hold the energy for the doctor that has the answer that I want. This is why we pray for each other. We pray for each other because we know, and this we know from science and from the medical world, when we pray, healing happens more easily. We know this. And so we pray for the right things for ourselves, and we pray for the right people and the right circumstances for each other when we're having medical conditions. And I don't know whether we're meant to be, if Myrtle did what Myrtle is said to have done, wow, that's just, right? It's just awesome. I'm not there yet. I've had some amazing healing experiences, but I'm not there yet. But I am willing to incorporate my personal work in my pursuit of health, because I think my personal spiritual work, because I think our spiritual work is really integral to our healing on every level, no matter how we go about it. Adrian, you've had your hand up for a long time. Thank you for being patient.
Well, thank you. I was just wondering if we could talk about maybe a definition of healing. I'm interested to know what you think about. Does healing always mean that an affliction is removed and that life is lengthened or sustained? I'm thinking about someone with a terminal illness. I recently lost a friend to colon cancer. Is it possible that healing could happen in the mind and the heart and the spirit, but not in the body? So I guess that's my question.
It's one of the reasons that we're looking at the four subtle bodies. I'll tell you, it's that you asked that particular question is very sweet to me. I lost my father to colon cancer in 2016, and I was blessed that he was diagnosed a year earlier, and I got to spend a lot of time with him talking about, and he did everything. Like if there was a way for him to heal himself, he was going to do it. he tried every mainstream medical process, and he tried every alternative medical process, and he went to God, and he did everything because he wanted his family to know it was important enough. And in the end, in the last surgery, and it was the surgery where they went in and they just couldn't even do what they went in to do. And my mom said, I can't go in and tell him this didn't work. So I did. And I went in and talked to my dad and said, they sewed you back up. They can't do this for you. And I'm a minister, I'm a minister. So how are you? I'm here for you. Do you want to talk about this? How do you feel about where you are in this healing process? And do you feel that this healing has failed? Where are you in it? And my dad said to me, I don't know how anybody could think that this was a failure. He said, I may not stay in this body, but I have healed so many aspects of my life over the last year. And, that's he healed the way he thought. He healed the way his heart felt about things. His body may not have been healed, but the aspects, his relationship with God was healed in a really powerful way, in ways that made transition so much easier for him. So yeah, for me, I absolutely think our definition of healing is important to any healing opportunity that we have. Would you like to add to that, my friend?
Well, I tend to stand away from the verb heal, and look at it more from the perspective of the absolute of health and wholeness. Because whenever I hear in classes, when someone talks about healing, it often comes from a place of lack, that there is something broken that needs to be fixed. And if we shift our way of thinking and feeling around the idea that we ultimately at the core are in this perfect health and wholeness, which essentially is what Myrtle Fillmore was inspired by E.B. Weeks saying, I'm a child of God and I do not inherit sickness. To really reaffirm that over and over again, rather than looking at the healing process. Let the healing process unfold as it is, but the affirmation remains within the absolute and the divine aspect of who we are. Then I'm wondering whether the definition of healing is useful even. Because in affirmation, when you learn about how to write your own denials and affirmations, when it comes to affirmations, we always make sure that you're not affirming anything that is limited. Always affirming the absolute truth, if possible, right? You remember that, those of you who studied that. And so that's usually a point I make in our daily pray-ins is when I look at the daily word and comment on it in terms of how the language is still very much used in a traditional limiting way rather than in an absolute affirmative way. And that's really where the difficulty lies. So rather than reaffirming or risk the reaffirmation of what we think healing looks like, we should affirm how absolute health and wholeness looks like and allow from that place to come back into our world so that our interpretation of healing can continuously expand from moment to moment. Otherwise, we're just saying the same thing over and over again. And that's where the importance of understanding that those 50 to 80,000 thoughts every day, they have some power in it. Not too scary, but there's some power in it. So what do we want to use those 50 to 80,000 thoughts for? Reaffirm what we think healing looks like, or imagine and be inspired by perfection, and then allow the process of limitation just unfold, and we learn to expand and expand from moment to moment.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. I love that. Wendy, I saw that you said, not sure I see the distinction between God and body. That's a good question to leave us with, because that's exactly where we're going next week. Our plan next week is to, on next Sunday, is to explore how we feel about physical healing and to understand the condition of the body. What is the body? What do we know about the body? What should we know about the body as we consider how the life we live affects us? And we're looking. I know both of us are looking forward. We'll have our conversation later this week about it, and then we'll be bringing that. So it's a really nice question for you to leave us with, to talk about. I want to honor. It's almost 10 after. And we plan an hour each week for this for the next 6 weeks. We're going to go all the way through till the Tuesday after Easter, because we want to kind of move through this metamorphosis with the community. We have loved having the time with you and just so appreciate it. This link will always be the same link we use. This is our regular Unity in the Rockies room. If you lose it, you can go to unityrockies.org, and it's on the very front page of our website. So if you have trouble following it, it's unityrockies.org, and you can just hit the link on that page and it will take you right into this room. We hope that you'll come back next week and share with your friends if you think they should come back, because it's really nice to get together as a bigger community and share this sacred space and look into one another's eyes. And Jean-Marie, I'm going to leave it to you for closing words.
Yeah, I just wanted to address real quick. So Queen had her hands up a few times and she was never acknowledged. So I'm going to stay behind if that's okay with you, Ahriana. And Wendy, yeah. I saw your question. It was private message to me. So I'm going to stay behind and try to address it too if you want. And well, my closing words are simply, I'm excited about this. This has been a desire of mine to create. Actually, I'm hoping we can inspire our community to continue this process of that spiritual talk back, to have these opportunities to talk with each other, take it deeper, disagree with each other, which Ahriana and I, by the way, do all the time. We hardly ever are going through like 10 minutes of conversation without disagreeing. And it's a lot of fun, right? We still can all be right, because that's where we need to be. So thank you so much. I hope you guys had fun. Give me a thumbs up if you had fun tonight. Okay? Well, not everyone, but the majority, so great. Thank you so much for allowing us to do this.
If you want to stay, you're welcome. Jean-Marie, I'm going to move you to host, and that way you can stay in here and answer questions to your heart's content. And I'm going to give you my love and tell you thank you so much. And I look forward to seeing you next week. Good night, everyone.
Thank you.